when you have a trust, when you've set up a revocable trust, a living trust, revocable living trust, something like that, the person who's going to be in charge of doing all of the things you want to happen after you pass away, such as making distributions to your children, setting up a charitable trust, giving money to a charity or to a church, an organization, something like that. Basically, selling real estate, basically doing all the things that you set up to happen after you pass away. That person is called the successor trustee, because while you're alive, typically you're going to be the trustee. You're the one in charge of managing your trust, doing things. But when you pass away, you have a successor trustee. And unfortunately, not every successor trustee does exactly what they're supposed to do. And so sometimes they can mess up the trust that you set up. So I'm just going to talk about a couple things that we see and give you some ideas and some things to think about, so that if you do have a trust or if you're setting up your own trust, it's something you're aware of and can hopefully plan for. First of all, they're just the successor trustee. Number one, they don't follow through with what you want to happen, right? So they're not following the trust exactly the way that you had intended it. And I guess the first thing to kind of step back a minute is you want to pick somebody who you trust, right? That probably goes without saying, but it's worth saying. You want to pick somebody that you actually trust, that wants to do this role, that would be willing to do it, has the capacity to do it, has the time to do it. And again, is someone that you would trust to actually do this, that would follow through on your wishes. So if you pick somebody and you've never spoken with them about it, and they live across the country and they're busy with their own lives and their own family, they may not want this responsibility, and they may be trying to find shortcuts to take. They may not want to, file accountings and prepare receipts and open up bank accounts and set up new trusts and work with an attorney and hire a CPA and do all that stuff that can potentially be a part of what we call trust administration. So number one, your trustee, your successor trustee may not follow through on everything that you want. So you want to choose the right person, and you want to make it simple enough for them, right? Because sometimes I'll have a client in my office and they just want to make it really, really difficult, or they want to control every little thing, which I get. I personally am a control freak as well. But you don't know what the situation is going to be like 20, 30 years from now, or whenever you pass away. And if you make it so strict that it can be almost overwhelming and impractical for the people who are going to be receiving these things or administering the trust, it just becomes a headache. So make it simple for them. Number two, they might mismanage the assets, and this might be intentional or unintentional. Right? If the money's in a bank account, it's being invested, it's with, an advisor, a wealth management company, something like that. Not that it can't be mismanaged, but the money, the things are typically going to be secure. If there's like a business or pieces of real estate that are going to have to be managed by the trustee, again, this goes back to the first point. You want to choose someone who can do it, has the capacity to do it, is willing to do it. And it may not be practical if you are, have your trust in Miami, Florida, but the person you named lives in Seattle. Like, are they really going to be able to be managing the properties from that far, or if it's a local business or something? So it may not be that they're doing things intentionally. It just might be that they're not in a great position to be able to manage those assets, and so they get mismanaged. They're not taken care of, or maybe they just put all the money in a checking account and it's getting no interest. And, that could potentially be seen as mismanaged as well. Number three, self-dealing. So this one is where there is maybe a little bit more, someone's doing something they just out of malice. They're just doing it to benefit themselves. And this is where, unfortunately, there might have to be a civil lawsuit, potentially a criminal lawsuit. The person that you've named as the successor trustee, they have what's called a fiduciary duty, meaning they have to act in the best interest of the beneficiaries of the trust. They can't engage in self-dealing. They can't Well, one, obviously they just can't be stealing money, but they can't do things that would directly or indirectly benefit them at the expense of other people. So again, back to the very beginning, you want to choose someone that you really trust. Sometimes, and it's actually surprisingly how often, but a lot of times people, they just don't have anybody that they really trust, or that they think would be willing to do this, or that they have the capacity to do this. So sometimes we'll recommend a corporate trustee, which might be a bank or a professional trustee or something like that. And so that might be something that you want to consider if you really don't have anybody. And lastly, there might be a conflict of interest, right? And so this would go to the point of where you just kind of need to know, the person needs to know, maybe they've got a competing business, right, against yours. Right, that might seem pretty obvious, but you want to talk with a potential successor trustee to see if there's any conflicts of interest there. So again, all of those things are avoidable, and it really goes to pick the right trustee, have a conversation with him or her, make sure they're willing and able to do this. And again, we can't control everything. Not everything will be perfect, but if we set them up for success, you're gonna have a much higher likelihood that your trust is going to be administered without any issues.